Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley number FBB179 5 by 4.5 US Prime is this hinge. And here is that hinge. That's a Stanley FBB179 is what it is. That is very likely most positively one of the certainly most common hinges that exist. FBB179. All of that part of the part number conspires to mean a number of things, and in no particular order. It means it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaf here that the that the leaves are meant to be flush and parallel when mortised to the edge of the door and frame. They're meant to be mortised flush, and when they're brought parallel, we're going to maintain that standard margin between the door and the frame. Okay, so it's a full mortise hinge. It also means that it is a 5-knuckle hinge. You can see why it's that. And that it is a ball bearing hinge, and that it is standard weight. A standard weight hinge will have 2 bearing packets, whereas a heavyweight hinge would have 4 bearing packets. An FBB 179 5-inch tall hinge is going to be 140 thousandths thick. My caliper is telling me 145 thousandths. And that's because it's 5-inch. If it was a 4.5 standard weight, it'd be 134 thousandths. If it was a heavyweight, an FBB 199, it would be 190 thousandths thick. Now, in addition to all of that, it means that it's made of steel. Okay, that is a steel-based hinge. I don't believe there's anything else buried in that part number. This is a 5 by 4.5. That means that the height is 5-inch tall. And the height is the first dimension on a hinge like this. The width is the second dimension. And that's really important to understand so that when you are prepping a door and frame, you know that you're prepping 5-inch tall and not 4.5 by 5. Hinges go height first, then the width. Doors are the opposite. They're width and then height. I don't know the entomology, I guess, or the history of why it was determined to size them that way. I would think it's because in lots of instances, the height is the most important dimension. Because the height is really what tells us a couple of things that come to mind. The door thickness that you can work with, and the weight or the size of the door that you can work with. So to kind of prove those 2 points, the thickness of the door, you can make a 4.5, you can make a 5-inch hinge work on an 1 3/8 door, but you know it's all wrong in doing so, because where you'd have to place everything, you'd have to have the hinge cut all the way through and have practically no backset to make an 1 3/8 door work. In the industry, it's understood that for an 1 3/8 door, you really need a 3.5-inch hinge, and that's because of the line from the swag of the hinge leaf, which is here, the swag line, out to the end. 3.5-inch would be appropriate for 1 3/8, and for 1 3/4 thick doors, 4-inch or 4.5-inch would work really well. Now you can do 5-inch, but if you're doing a 5 by 5, that's really too big for an 1 3/4 thick door. But in a hinge like this, where you've got 5 by 4.5, it's clearly understood, and to make clear the second point, the weight of the door that you're working on. A 5-inch tall hinge, 4.5 wide, versus a 4.5-inch tall hinge and 4.5-inch wide is very commonly specified, and it's standard practice to specify a 5-inch tall hinge in lieu of a 4.5 when you're dealing with doors that are wider than 3 foot, 3'4", 3'6", especially 3'8" and 4'0". You'll see 5-inch tall hinges. So if I'm thinking 5-inch, I'm very likely thinking a heavy door that may not be 1 3/4, or a wider door that may not be 1 3/4. Wide throw hinges, I guess to prove the point a little bit further, will have a different part number. So if it's Stanley, it's going to be WT. They're going to put WT in there, and that will help you realize. So if it's a 5 by 4.5 or a WT 4.5 by 5, which I don't think exists, it'd be a 4.5 by 6. They're giving you a different part number to help understand, oh, I see, this hinge is wider than it is tall. And the same logic with the door. What is the first thing that you want to know about the door? Well, I'd like to know the width, and then tell me the height. With the size of the hinge, let me know the height first, because that's going to tell me, you know, what type of door are we dealing with, and then possibly the door thickness. So if someone is telling me they need a 4-inch hinge or a 4.5-inch hinge, I'm thinking about different applications when I hear about the height of the hinge, or a 3.5-inch hinge. Now, a 3.5 is easy because someone says I need a 3.5-inch hinge. I'm automatically thinking lightweight door, 1 3/8. And if they come back at me and say it's 3.5 by 6, well, now I know that we're dealing with a different dimension, a different type of hinge. It's a wide throw. But if someone were to say they need a 3.5-inch or a 6 by 3.5, I'm thinking, okay, something's really wrong with that hinge, because you wouldn't have a 6-inch tall hinge that's only 3.5 wide, even though you could draw it on paper. What in the world would you need such a tall hinge on such a thin door? So the way that hinge sizes run kind of tip the cards in terms of understanding exactly what the application is for, a little bit more so than just the possibility that it's random. It's not random. You do want to know the height. You don't want to get this messed up. And it's nice that they have 4.5-inch or even 4-inch, because the vertical axis of pivoting, and especially in a 4.5 by 4, when you draw that hinge pin back closer, even at just that 1/4 inch, it really tells us that your wall condition is such that you don't necessarily have a problem getting the door out and open, you know, like to well past 90 degree. So that's important to realize that a 4.5-inch wide would be very typical in a 5-inch tall, because you're very likely dealing with a frame that will wrap the wall, that you can swing it out and around, and there's no reason to have anything wider than 4.5-inch, certainly, because it would also potentially cause a problem with backset and how you machine the door. 5 by 4.5, we've covered that. Prime coat, that's the P in the part number. That's one thing that I love about Stanley is that their fit and finish is always excellent. Even on a prime coat hinge, their hinges just look more handsome than practically everyone else's. And I am just going to say that because I believe it to be quite true. It says something about the company when their quality of manufacturing gives you, even on the back side of the hinge, down in the crotch of the hinge, everything is well, nice and painted. And if they can get paint done too, I'm telling you that they can get stainless steel done as well, or a bronze or brass base material. Another thing that I like about Stanley is their logo. Why? Well, it's a nice logo, sure, but it's petite. I've got some manufacturers who put a big, giant logo up here, and I honestly don't want corporate advertising on, my hinges if I'm doing a door and frame job. I want the client to know whose hinge they've got, but it doesn't need to be huge. And Stanley does a nice job by keeping it petite and very small in footprint. This is going to include all machine screws and all wood screws. That would be fairly typical in door manufacturers. I would very much recommend that you specify what you want in terms of the quantity of fasteners. If you're doing wood by wood, wood frame, wood door, don't hold back and not tell us, I want all wood fasteners, because, there are some manufacturers, and I'm not saying that Stanley does all wood and all machine every time, because they won't. Because if you ordered a 6x6 hinge, why would they send you any machine screws? It's very unlikely that you're going to need machine screws. And you might get half wood and all machine screws and say, that makes no sense. This is clearly a 3-inch thick door, or whatever, an 8x8. I've done some 8x8 hinges, and they sent machine screws, and I'm thinking, I've never, I don't know why it's going to be wood by wood almost always. The point of the matter is there's no reason for anyone to guess or even worse to get it wrong, so specify what you'd like. This Stanley hinges also include this cardboard. These are shims, believe it or not, which is very nice. No one else includes them as standard, and by all means, use them, but don't use them on fire-rated doors. Shims cannot be made of anything other than steel in a fire-rated door. So under the duress of a fire door, as someone's removing the screws to see what is propping the hinge up, under the duress of a fire door audit, a door would be failed or found out of compliance if you've got shims underneath the hinge on either the door or frame that are not made of metal. There is a link below this video to a document called Template, and that's going to allow us to review all of the dimensional properties of the FBB179 hinge and all of its sister products, meaning all of the sister products that will fit into the drawing that's on that template. So I would suggest that you review that. It's a very nice drawing that will give you the F dimension, swag line dimension, and that's really helpful when people are trying to figure out what size hinge do I need, especially when you're dealing with maybe a requirement of a wide throw application where, you need to calculate in your mind and on paper what dimension from the back of the hinge do I need to the swag line, understanding what this dimension is, or at least from the edge to the center of this dimension, because you know this dimension, what you need to order to get the proper stacking of a door or movement of a door out and around something. Stacking would apply to accordion doors. I've seen doors that were 4 panels, all the same size, but one panel would fold this way. Panel 2 and 1 would then fold behind panel 3. That would all fold in front of panel 4. So a lot of that took a tremendous amount of laying out to determine the progressive widening of the hinges as the unit went forward. In Manhattan was that building that I had seen. If you've been there, you realize every square inch is highly compressed and accounted for. So they had to be really smart about how they could get material in without big doors swinging out, which, the opening may have been 12 feet. I don't know how large it was. May have had 4 30-inch doors. So swinging out a couple of 5-foot doors would certainly never work. Or 10-foot pair of 5-foot doors, 4.5-foot doors, whatever it is. So that's an application where you could really use this template to determine what you need. If you're not sure if the new hinge that you're buying is going to match the requirements of where your holes are located, go ahead and review that. That template is for all 5-inch tall hinges. If you're doing standard applications in an interior application and you do have 3'6" size doors, 3/8 in hospitals, take a look at the 4-inch. That might be a better application in width because you don't want projecting hardware any more than necessary. And 4.5 by 4 is a very underutilized size in the world of steel doors and wood doors and steel frames when it comes to applications where your jamb is wrapping the wall. And you're going to go to 90, but you could, if you pushed it far enough, go to 180 or wherever the door closer would stop you. That projecting hardware off the face of the frame, it can be less than otherwise, and even a 1/4 inch would really matter, in my opinion, of going from 4.5 to 4.5 to 4.5 by 4, or a 5 by 4.5 to 5 by 4. Available, of course, in all of the finishes that Stanley can do, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, nickels, polished satin, oil rubbed. That template gives a lot of part numbers for a lot of different hinges, and a tour through the Stanley catalog would be very, it's very enlightening. Their first 10 pages or so of the catalog is just an encyclopedia on hinges. And if you have more than an occasional need to work within the realm of hinges, it would be 20 minutes well spent to just familiarize yourself with the standard terms that are being tossed around. This is a removable pin hinge. I can easily drive that pin out. If you're dealing with an exterior door that swings out, you'll want to order this as an NRP, non-removable pin. You can remove the pin, but it has a feature that will prevent it from being removed, which is a set screw that is drilled and tapped into the barrel here that you cannot see from the outside. And I've tried. It's all but impossible to pull that pin out. This is a button tip is what they call this, a button tip. You can do decorative tips, urn, the most common ball tip, steeple tip, acorn tip can be done. Back to the security options, Stanley can do other security options like a security stud. They might be able to do a reverse security stud. Electrification can be done naturally. Radiused corners can be done. Hospital tips can be done. And a variety of a confluence of all of those things put together can be done. Finally, there is that link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I am absolutely a fan of Stanley, and it is simply stated as the fit and finish is the best in the business when it comes to hinges, in my opinion, across the board. Whatever finish, even painted, they look great when they come out of the box. It's a testament to who they are behind the catalog or the telephone number, in my opinion. Any questions on the FBB 5x4.5 and a USP finish, FBB179, or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.